So we're here with Tech Field Day at Share 2024 in Kansas City. And one of the things that keeps coming to my mind is, well, the existential question of why do we still have all this stuff? Why do we need why is the mainframe still so important? And it occurs to me that certainly part of that is that we need things, it's the right platform for some applications. Some of it is for historic reasons, data gravity or application gravity, or just sort of we haven't gotten around to migrating that anywhere else. But I think that there are probably very good technical reasons to have some things in a mainframe environment and some things not. And so I want to throw that to the field day delegates here. Why do we have the mainframe? And I don't mean that as why do we need this thing, but literally, why do we have this? Why does it make sense? So go ahead.
Thanks, Stephen. So I think the thing that comes to mind for me is that shouldn't be an IT answer. It's a business answer. What does the application need? What are its qualities of service? What security requirements does it have? What performance does it need? And I don't think we're going to get away from the fact that some organisations absolutely have to have a mainframe. Some workload sits best on the mainframe. But it's not the perfect workhorse for all the workload. It's a mix. Yeah, we talk about hybrid, and it is a hybrid. Yeah. Do you want the mainframe to be a print server? No, there's a much easier way to do that.
Yes, so many people have used mainframes as print servers.
That was the only thing we had back in the 80s, yeah? But would you want to put your credit card application that houses all that data, super fast responses? Look at some of the airlines, yeah, the transaction rates that they need to sustain over long periods of time, yeah, with millisecond response time. There isn't another platform available to an organisation today to do that at that scale. And yeah, is there a place for the mainframe? Absolutely. Is it the right place for all workloads? No, it's not. And it's about picking the right platform for the application, and we have to be grown up as mainframers to be able to say, actually, that's not best here. There's a better solution over there, and that. But I think that's a business conversation.
So open systems people, are you convinced? Jeremy, do you want to take this one?
I don't disagree at all. I think we've struggled over the years, especially when we go back to think the new and cool, like that. Oh well, we're just going to use this And I'll throw out Kubernetes as this thing. It's like, oh, okay, well, everything needs to be on Kubernetes. Yep, cool, check, done. And it doesn't, as much as I like to say, hey, it'd be great if tech teams could make decisions without the business. The reality is, we've seen the result of that, and we have a lot of problems in the industry now. So I think, to your point, yes, business. It doesn't bother me to say, you know what, yeah, business needs to start making a little bit more of those, but none of those decisions should be made on an island either. Oh. And too often we create these silos that, for sometimes good reasons, often not, but that create that environment where we say, well, we're just going to make the decision and tell you what. And it's the old sales thing. It's like, sales is going to, tell you what to build. Well, that's horrific and bad. So it's figuring out where that sits. I think from a systems and even DevOps and all these other things that we're dealing with now. Yeah, we've got to have a better communication of what our needs are and do to that, and not just what we can do.
See, I don't think it's incumbent on the business to tell us we're going to use that technology or that technology. I think they need to say, we need the application to be able to do this.
Yes.
And then it's down to the technical teams across all these different platforms to get together and say, okay, what's the best solution for the business? Because you go to some organisations and this business is using this development tool chain, and this business over here is using a different one. And we as the techies have got to somehow plug all this together, and we end up with plumbing and integration buses and all this kind of stuff. Yeah. No, tell us what you want. Yeah. So I want millisecond response time. I want 24/7 availability. I want high security. Right. That's probably going to end up on the big machine. Okay. Look, I need this application Monday to Friday, 9 till 5. and the data's not really useful to anybody else but us. Okay, where do you want to put it? Yeah. And it's that kind of conversation we should be having with the business, not, well, we want to use Kubernetes, I want to use containers, well, we need to be using Red Hat Linux. Why do you care as the business? That's not their job. And that, I find that frustrating. Yeah.
And we see that amplified, and I'll maybe throw Microsoft under the bus, but their biggest moneymaker still is Office 365 subscriptions. And they get, developers by default are not, they will never choose, and I'll say never, and whatever, they'll never choose Azure as their platform to go develop something on. It just, it doesn't fit the needs for what people are doing. But you get, IT procurement loves one check that they can write.
Right.
And so Microsoft plays off of that and says, okay, cool. You can get all of these services with Office 365. Oh, and we'll give you free Azure. And now everybody starts migrating things over there, and we start pigeonholing or putting square pegs around of the business that isn't actually what it needs to be doing. And so we've created a lot of our own problems in there when we've said, especially at the enterprise level, that we just want this. And the vendors are like, oh no, we'll definitely play to that, and we muddy the waters.
Yeah, I love you can have this for free.
Yep.
Is there really anything for free?
Right.
Today, yes. 3 years down the line, 5 years down the line, not so sure as the price goes.
Yep. Exactly.
And I think that raises a very important point about whose responsibility is this to resolve this. And actually, one of the parties that has to sit around the table, there's no such thing as when you talk about the concept of a buyer in a given organization, it's not one person anymore, never really has been, but it's a whole committee of people. And the procurement team have a huge part to play in that. But they often carry a lot more weight because they're the ones negotiating the contracts. Oh, we've gone with this supplier because they were cheaper. Well, that wasn't what the advice was from the people who devised what the best solution would be.
Yeah.
And actually, I've seen bad decisions made because procurement found that, it was just easier to deal with this single vendor because you can get everything you need. They had this very long menu of things that, we can do all of those things, luckily enough. Oh, well, that's a blessing. And you end up then sort of kind of regretting that decision over time because there's a misalignment between the technology teams, between the procurement teams, and between the people who are actually specifying the change requirement in the first place. That's a very tightly coupled alignment that's required in many organizations where it typically doesn't happen that way. And that's where you get some of the problems. Because you've got a laundry list of a long list of criteria that you need to meet. And it's very rare that, everyone's going to get together and go through that list together and agree on it. And, one of which is, you mentioned CrowdStrike earlier on, security is a huge consideration as well. And right about now, everyone's thinking, have we made a terrible decision here in terms of our supplier of choice?
Exactly, and that's the thing that occurs to me too, is in this age of centralization risk. Like I was one of the people that was flying on the day of CrowdStrike, and that showed in a graphic way. I think that people tend to overstate the impact of this or that security problem, but I think that it does show this concentration risk. If every system is using CrowdStrike, then one problem with CrowdStrike takes down every system. The airlines, I was flying on United. It's all mainframe based. Everything was fine, except all the boards and all the check-ins. So they did paper check-ins and we flew.
Right.
Because it wasn't affected by CrowdStrike. So I think that there is an aspect of concentration risk, and not just for security, but also for stability and high availability and so on. But when it comes to security, that gives me some questions too. You want to weigh in here?
Yeah, so I would say from a technical standpoint, I think we really think about security. How do we protect it? How do we make the data in integrity and confidentially? But the business side of the house really is more concerned about resiliency. Is it going to be available? How much money am I going to lose?
Because ultimately, that's the question.
Right, in a hack. And so I think when we talk about data is really the unifying factor, because now data really is the cash cow of the business. I have to have your data I need to secure it so you'll trust me with it. So I have to promise you I can secure it. But I also have to have it available to you when you fly, when you're at the supermarket. You're not getting hacked online using my product. So data has to be the unifying, my opinion, has to be the unifying connector between IT and the business.
And how valuable is it to you?
Right.
How valuable, how important from an operational perspective. But you look at CrowdStrike, and I looked at that and thought, in my world, in the mainframe world, that wouldn't have happened because we'd have had resiliency. Because we very often run a dual image setup. I've got system A and system B. I'll drop the maintenance onto system A. If something goes wrong, I'll dynamically switch it to B because I know that works. Okay, solve the problem. Okay, switch it back, move it backwards and forwards. And the large financial institutions and the banks and the insurance and the healthcare companies have cracked that. But we don't seem to learn some of the lessons in the wider IT. And I was just surprised you can make one change to one system and not be able to just go, actually, we've got a problem, repoint it there.
Right. Yeah, because,
Where's the hot DR?
Where's your high availability? Where's your resilience?
Because
I don't want to.
Your boot was such a great idea to just have it dialed down to one thing. Yeah.
I don't want to throw any stones, but in this case too, I mean, it was a real lack of you got some stones? Okay, get out your bag of stones. I mean, it was a real lack of proper deployment processes as well. I mean, essentially they ran the configuration file through a synthetic approval mechanism that said, looks good to me, and they rolled it out to everyone. It's like, that's not how you do this.
And it was process changes that they made much earlier that said that took away the a lot of not the manual testing, but took away a lot of that. Like, okay, well, let's test this in a couple different environments.
Right.
He said, well, we just need to test it in one thing, and never went back and looked at, are these environments the same? Are they valid? Are they they never did that. Made it from a shareholder perspective, what was going to make them more money as a company, and said, we're just gonna, we can cut those out, save money here, and be great. And I said at the time, everybody tests in production, whether they want to admit it or not. Just most of us test in, a couple systems before it hits there. And they just went, nope, not going to do that.
Well, to their defense, though, I mean, the reason they did this, I mean, it's right there in the name of the product. This is supposed to be a rapid reaction product that is continually updated. It was maybe a little too rapid.
They were on point.
I do want to separate the questions because both of them are valid, but I don't think it's not one question because there's a security component that you talked about. So what do we do? But I think one of the things we're not looking at, Mark, your fundamental thing was right sizing the application, knowing what. See, we're having less people that understand what really belongs on the mainframe because they're retiring. And these younger people, these younger managers, 35 or less, they have no background in mainframe. They don't know anything about it. So to them, even though there's an application that's happened to a couple of my students, they had a wonderful proposal for MetLife, and I don't care where this needs to be public. They had a wonderful proposal that would say, and I looked at their data. They were trained by me, so I looked at their data. Their numbers were good. It would save MetLife millions of dollars by just running some things, consolidating some things on VM. Their manager, who was in his mid-30s, said, well, we're not going to do that. And it was the right solution. So I'm seeing more of that. And that's a part of the security question. I'm not a security expert. Some of you in here are security experts. That's not my bailiwick. But I'm an educator, and I know we need more people that understand how to make the right call. That's right.
Because it's not the right call if you're not familiar with the best tool for the job. It's not the right call. And not because you're not but you're not familiar with it.
Well, we're not, whether we're security experts or mainframe experts or cloud experts, I think we're all IT people here. Probably most of the viewers are IT people here too. And we're all used to people using the wrong tool for the job for nerdy reasons, essentially. People fall in love with things. I mean, if you want something that's, highly resilient and can handle tens of transactions per second, throw a blockchain at it, right? I mean, remember when that was the solution to, what's the question? The solution is blockchain. Well, what's the question? The solution is Kubernetes.
We have a slightly different way of saying that in the UK. If your only response is a nail, the only tool you've got is a hammer, and it's exactly the same thing. But you talk about right sizing and security. I was working with an airline a couple of weeks ago, and we were doing some testing, and I was saying to them, how responsive does this application have to be? Less than a millisecond. Okay, got to have an instant response, less than a millisecond. And we were deploying some technology and we were upgrading stuff, and the response times went to 1.1 millisecond. And they said, we cannot sustain that. That will break our application. And I was, 0.1 of a millisecond? Really? And then they explained the application to me, and I went, oh my. They have a logging system for this thing. And they have, mainframe nerdy talk, 40,000 tracks by 16 log files. 40, and that's a lot of data. How long does it take to fill 40,000 tracks? 90 seconds. 90 seconds. They hit this thing that hard. And they actually cache it in storage first and flush it to the disk. 90 seconds. And they said, if we have an extra millisecond, that means we will probably slow the whole airline down for everything. Online bookings, check-in, everything, baggage, everything. 40,000 tracks of information in 90 seconds. I was blown away by it.
They can equate to then revenue. And,
Yeah. And we were talking about 0.1 of a millisecond change. So we had to do a bit of extra work to get it back under the millisecond. And it was like, I hadn't worked in that kind of fast environment for a long time, and it was just it was quite eye-opening. Well, they chose the mainframe before that. That's what they use it for.
And you have to look at tail latency. I think, John, you've been in a presentation or heard about. That's the problem too. It doesn't matter if most of the transactions are done in a millisecond. If some of them take 2 milliseconds,
it's a problem.
If 5% of them take 2 milliseconds, you broke the application anyway.
Yeah.
And that's actually a big problem with a lot of modern IT systems. Is that a lot of I'm sorry, but a lot of the things that you're saying a mainframe can handle, all these transactions and stuff, I'm sure a lot of people are chuckling and thinking, oh yeah, how many transactions does Facebook handle per second? How many transactions does Twitter handle per second? But the difference is, of course, nobody cares if some of those take an extra second to complete or don't complete at all, because it's not flying planes or things crashing into each other. It's not the stock market.
Transactions.
I'm sensing that you've got something to say. I can see it in your face, Gina.
It's just so much of this is not practical and so not scientific and so not engineering thought. When we really think about it, right? There's stuff that people laugh at us sometimes. If you tell your family that really everything is held together by chewing gum and twine, but it really is. And the reason for it is that we switch, that the business is responsible for getting us what we need. There's personalities that drive which platforms we can use. And that's what we end up with. And every new startup you see is just trying to make it so that you actually have a connector piece instead of another piece of gum, sticking things together and hoping that it works. But the stuff with CrowdStrike, with making sure you're not testing in production, I'm sorry, but that's normal. That's IT, what you do. Going fast and breaking things is how it seems like the new paradigm is. And you can't do that with everything. So it's almost like I had kind of the thought that some of what we're talking about coming from the mainframes through storage, through what we have now, we have all of these great hardware improvements to do new things, which lead to software improvements. But what we're getting is the fast fashion industry. We're getting a bunch of crap that doesn't last, that you throw away, that is ruining the earth. We're doing kind of the same thing with IT. It's just slapping together the next best thing and hoping you get somebody to endorse it. And maybe the venture capitalist will give you a whole bunch of money and you'll be a billionaire. If it doesn't work out, you peace out and you try again, do something else. But it's not this engineering focus to be able to secure the world's data, to find the information and the connectivity to the information to solve the world's problems, which we could do if we weren't screwing around with bubblegum and twine all the time.
Boy, that is a painful metaphor, but I think it's an accurate one. Fast fashion.
I mean, but this is what I propose, though. And I want people around the table to see if this resonates. What I'm hearing is that people just aren't being properly trained. They aren't properly being acclimated to the skills and the understandings that they need. But does anyone agree with me or disagree? Okay, so this is what I propose. We get together collectively, whatever body it is. It could be Tech Field Day, it could be whatever, and just determine what is the proper training of an IT person, networking, database, and not just the skills they need, but the philosophy behind it, the way they need to. That's the way I trained my people at A&T. Our program was good. We had, in my opinion, we had one of the best IT programs in the country because it was more about culture and philosophy than it was about technology. I think that's what we need to start doing and come to some agreement, some industry agreement about this is the good way to do it. Then let me teach it, and then that will solve that problem. Now it won't solve it immediately, but down the road, 5, 10 years, and I'm talking about scaling. I'm not just talking about my class. I'm talking about tens of thousands of students standardizing on tens of thousands of computer science students. And if the university don't want to do it, we'll have an independent program where you can go through us. If your school doesn't want to teach you, we'll teach it to you. But let's just do, instead of just whining about how bad the problem is, I don't do hopeless. Let's figure out what it is. Is there an action item for this? If there's not an action item for it, why are we discussing it? I don't understand. If there's not a remedy for it, I mean, it's like trying to find a remedy for death. There is none. You're going to die. You're not going to solve that equation. So there's no need of trying to. But that's, is there any comment or disagreement? I'm about making this thing better. We can do much better. It's good. We're very well educated and we can articulate with infinite granularity what the damn problem is. I get it. I'm tired of that. We can do better. I'm sorry. We can do better.
So I agree with you. I think one of the things when I started in the industry and in tech, it was real emphasis on the tech skills. Now it has to be more on communication. How do you translate those security risks to the business where they can understand it?
Agreed.
Translate that incident response and those red teams to loss of revenue.
Yeah.
The cost of deploying
I love it.
test and production environments that actually do replicate those development environments. And that's not happening. And it's an investment choice.
Well,
I'm not going to give you 2 test environments. You're going to do the best you can with what I give you in test. That doesn't really reflect what's the production environment. So to Jeremy's point, when you roll that code into production, that's a whole new ballgame.
Well, to get back to the core, the starting premise of the discussion, I think what you're saying actually reminds me of another reason that I hadn't even mentioned. Why do we need the mainframe? Maybe this is why we need the mainframe. Maybe because it's a more rigorous environment. Maybe because it's an environment where people aren't going to make the same move fast and break things, philosophy that Gina points out. Maybe this is an environment. Maybe we should embrace this as an environment where we can have proper approach philosophically to the problem instead of having the same. That same Silicon Valley, web application kind of approach to things. I don't know, but I do want to, I get it back. I asked you to start it. I'm going to ask you to wrap it up here. Why do we need the mainframe?
Why do we need the mainframe? A really good question. I'm not going to answer the question. Okay, I'm gonna say try and do without it.
That's it.
Yeah? Try and do without it because we all use it all the time. And we talk about marketing. Yeah, IBM are an engineering company, and they're the worst marketeers in the world for technology. Could you imagine if Steve Jobs, or somebody like Zuckerberg, owned this technology? There'd be one in everybody's house.
Are you kidding me?
Let alone everybody's business.
Right.
Are you kidding?
It has a unique set of qualities, and when used properly, is very, very difficult to vote against.
I love that.
But I would turn around and say, just walk down Main Street or in the UK, one of our city centres, and just go, right, we'll turn their mainframe off, we'll turn their mainframe off and turn their mainframe off. Yeah. And just see what would happen. I mean, I like watching movies and relating stuff to movies. Die Hard 4.0, they called it a file sale. I tell you what, yeah, turn them all off for a day. Yeah.
See what happens.
We turned one off in the UK, one mainframe system caught a cold, and it was a pretty serious one. It was on the BBC News on the Sunday evening.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, and it made them, and it was, yeah, mortgages didn't get paid, people didn't get paid, yeah, people couldn't move house and all houses. People don't understand just how big a thing this is, and I think it's, to wrap it up, it's never ever going to go anywhere. It's going to be here for a long time. I was told in 1980, Mark, learn something else because the mainframe might not be here in a few years' time. Well, I've just done 44 years of doing the same job, so it isn't going to go anywhere. And I think, yeah, with what it offers, it's very difficult to replace. We come back to the first point. It's not the right thing for everybody, but when used properly, it's an absolutely fabulous piece of technology, and people just need to embrace it.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for wrapping that up. Thank you all for watching. This has been a Tech Field Day Roundtable discussion.